Tonight this is a panel having to do with being in a Baba family. That's the general focus, but it can take off from there. And we have Shireen Bonner, who you know, and Franey Irani, who was married to Adi Irani, Baba's brother, and Jay Bonner married to Shireen. And I'll just kick it off. There's an old Chinese proverb that says that if there is peace in the heart, there will be peace in the home. And if there is peace in the home, there will be peace in the family. If there's peace in the family, there will be peace in the community. If there's peace in the community, there will be peace in the world, and it goes on like that. So I would like them to comment on this. Because that's Chinese, and something else goes on in India.
This is an Irani family. Yeah, it's I don't know how much peace in the world, and I don't know how much peace in the community, but certainly in the house it hardly seems peaceful. But maybe maybe that makes sense, because I couldn't honestly say that there's peace in the heart either. I mean. It's a roller coaster kind of life, I think, probably for everybody.
Hear, hear.
I don't really know how to respond to that. No, peace doesn't seem to be something that Baba has dealt out to us. And I'm sure I'm sure we all know as Baba lovers, as Jack spoke about, the gift of suffering that he loves to bestow upon us. And, I find myself often cracking jokes about people who have newly come to Baba, and I'll say, oh, the innocent children, little do they know. But, there's an element of truth in that. But peace is a different thing. I mean, inner peace, I don't know, maybe that is there. But there's certainly a lot of many superficial layers of chaos, I would say. I don't know if peace is the exact opposite to chaos, but our lives are and have always been very chaotic. But I guess Baba is the peace inside. That's all I can say.
I can agree with that. I found my inner peace now.
You found it now?
Yeah.
How about before?
Well, I was young at that time, and like everyone else, you're seeking peace, but it's difficult. You've got to work on it also. And I've had my chaos in my time, but Baba has given me a lot of strength, and he's given me that inner peace. Now I can feel it within me, and I think I don't worry as he wants me to, as I used to worry at one time, and I think I have my peace. He gives it to me.
I would say for it seems to me that my life was much more peaceful before I got married. But also I feel so much closer to Baba through exposure to the family and just the focus on Baba. So peace isn't the word that we sort of think about.
Can you start us from the earlier times, like how you became a family, and it would start with your first coming to England with Adi? Tell us a little bit about the early times with Adi and coming there.
Yeah, well, once we were married, we moved home several times in India. Then finally we went to Baba and asked, we wanted to go to America, and he said he thought first, and he said, no. If you want to go, you go to England. So we came to England in 56, and with the idea of looking around first and hoping to settle down, because there was turmoil still in England. The war, after the war, there was still a bit of rationing, and it was a hard year first because we couldn't find anywhere to live. You know, people would just shut their doors on our faces because we were from India. And fine, I don't know. I mean, I think I've told you, some of you know my story, how I came to England and how I stayed there, because it was possibly Baba's will, because I didn't want to go back again, but Adi felt he wanted to go back. He couldn't find any job. And so it happened that Baba was on his way to America and Australia, and he stopped over in London. And there was a meeting, you know, a small gathering at the Rubens. And we went there. And Adi and I had an audience with him, a private one. And he asked us how we were doing. Of course, Adi said he wanted to go back, that it was too hard and difficult here for him. And Baba didn't ask me that, but he sensed that I wanted to stay on. But Adi said that, you know, Freni can't get any job. She's trained. She's walked all over London to find a job. So Baba gave me a time limit. This was July, I think, or June. I can't remember. It was a summertime in London. And he gave me a time limit if I didn't find a job, that till that time, then I should pack up and go. And at that particular time, he also, at the end of this time limit, he said, well, he just out of the blue asked me, would you like a baby? And I looked at him in amazement first, and I said, my goodness. And I said, yes, Baba, if you want me to have one. And he said, well, we'll see about that. So it was some weeks after, you know, a month had gone by, and I was in searching for a job, and I couldn't find anything. Finally, it was my list of going to people's, the beauty shops. It was dwindling down to 2. So I was just thinking negative, and I said, well, I have to go back to India now, probably. These last 2 wouldn't have me too. But the last one was the interview I went to. I went with, I was going in a sari to all the other interviews, and Delia's sister, Minta, told me to wear a dress. I was staying at her basement apartment then. And so she said, Freni, go in a Western outfit, have your hair cut, and all that sort of thing. So I did all that, and then I went off on my interview. If most of you know London, Bond Street, you know, one of the very rich areas. And I arrived there at my interview and go in, and there's a long queue waiting to be, girls waiting to be interviewed for the same job, and I'm at the end of the queue. So I had no hopes, and I was thinking, my goodness, somebody will be picked up in the middle of the interview, and that's the end of that, and I'll have to go back to India. So, however, no, it didn't happen that way. The line went shorter and shorter, and it came to my turn, and I was quite amazed. So I went in and had my interview, and the man said, when can you come? Oh my goodness, I was so surprised. So I said, well, give me time. my husband must know also. So I asked him for a week's time. And but then I told him, I thought perhaps he doesn't know I'm Indian. At the back of my mind, I thought I'd have to be honest, because going to all these hunting for flats. Everybody was shutting doors on our faces. So I said, I come from India. So he looked at me and he says, that doesn't matter. He said, in any case, I thought that you were Italian. So I said, oh. Then I went off, and Adi had come to fetch me, and then when he saw my smiling face, he was a bit despondent. He didn't like the idea we had to stay on. So we went home, and then I started working, and I hardly started working for about 2 or 3 months, and I found out I was pregnant. Suddenly, Baba had asked me, but I didn't know, but he worked on me probably, and I was pregnant, which I didn't know would happen so soon, so I was a bit worried. What would my boss say? I've just started a job and I'm asked to leave. I kept working for about 7.5 or 8 months, and then I gave my, resignation in. I said, he didn't mind, he was all right, he was very good about it. And there I had my daughter Shireen, and that's how her life began. From that, and here she is.
But you had, I'm supposed to raise my hand. But you had, you found your job just before the time limit.
Yes,
that was the
that's
point.
right. Yeah, I forgot to say that. Yes, I got the job before. Actually, it was the last day of my time limit. Yeah, last day of my time limit. So. See, Baba must have wanted us to stay on. There was a reason.
Can you say something about what Adi started doing when he was there?
Yes, and everything started to sort of go into place because fortunately, just before I had Shireen, we met a very sweet old Baba follower who was very fond of Will and Mary Beckett. And she was Italian, and she ran a little sort of rag trade in the middle of London somewhere and did antique business. And so that was the right thing, and we got friendly, and she gave all her spare stuff she had to Adi to start a business. So for 1.5 years, Adi started an antique business. But unfortunately, the overheads were so high for the shop that we had. So then finally he quit that and started working from home with Fred Marks, as you all must know. Do you know Fred Marks? Well, Fred Marks, and Baba had asked Fred to help Adi because Fred had a nose for antiques, They don't know, say who Fred is. Oh, Fred Marks was a very old follower of Baba. He's recently, how many years ago died? I can't remember. He died about 3 or 4 years ago, and a very devout Baba person. And he was also one of the, who used to visit Will and Mary Beckett. They always had little tea parties, Will and Mary. They were the unique Baba people I've ever met in my life. No wonder Baba called Mary his, archangel. He called both of them archangels. They were really wonderful people. And I remember she used to always make these rock cakes for me, and they were real rock cakes. They were really hard. But she enjoyed doing something. It was all natural food, no artificial. She wove her own clothing, spun her own thread. She was really out of the, Middle Ages sometime, But she was wonderful, wonderful woman. And she used to make her little crab apple jellies and bring them home to me with this rock buns of hers. And we ate them, we had to eat them, we couldn't make her unhappy. So Fred was one of people who went to their house, and that's how we met him. And he was a dear old soul, very, very nice person. He had his little idiosyncrasies, but still he was nice, and he helped Adi a lot. And that's how Adi started. So we had some income, because it was very hard going. And we had bought a house just before she was born. We were fortunate to buy a house, and a month before Shireen was born, and and it was named Mehr Manzil because we gave a few names to Baba, and he chose Mehr Manzil. So we call that house Mehr Manzil, and it's been. I've left it now. We lived in it over 30 years. And so Shireen, I took to her, she was born in a hospital. We moved in there a month before she was born, and I brought her back home. None of the neighbors knew I was pregnant. I brought back a baby home. They were all surprised. and here she is, a gift from Baba.
Can you talk about some of your early memories as a child and like in a Baba family, or knowing that you were somehow a little bit different?
Well, there was that aspect of, I don't know if I felt that I was different. No, I didn't really feel that. I just knew that there was this huge, thing in our life that was different. I mean, it wasn't so much me. I mean, one sort of funny thing was I mentioned that I went to this really, real sort of pucker English girls' school, and in England it's not like here. I mean, most of the state schools, but I went to a private school. But even most of the state schools, children do have to go to some kind of assembly. I mean, it's sort of changing a little bit, but basically it's Church of England, and that's, you can be excused from going to assembly, but it's not like in America where you can't have any religious service in a school. Is that right? That's how it is here. But my school was very strongly affiliated to the Church of England. So there was morning assembly, and in addition there was scripture class, which is, you know what that is? It's religious education, I suppose. And it was a wonderful school. It was, really old building, sort of wood paneling and corridors, real sort of like a historical building.
Is it the school where Kitty went?
Yes, it's where she went. And, in keeping with that tradition, there were some real eccentric ladies who'd been teaching there for the last 100 years, and they'd never left, covered in cobwebs, that kind of thing. And in amongst them was the scripture teacher, who was just completely mad. She was a fanatic. But apart from that, I can't remember how it really came about, but Adi and Freni both felt, and I'm certain, I think you wrote to Baba that I shouldn't go to scripture classes. And in my first school, I went to St. Paul's Junior, and then I went to St. Paul's Senior School, which was a school that was sort of the miracle that I got into. I was excused from the scripture classes, and the reason was given, I think, that we followed a spiritual master. So I just went off into a room by myself, and I remember, kind of wishing I could listen to some of the stories about Christ, and I thought just Bible stories, but that did come from Baba at that time. And then when I went to my senior school, and I turned into a bit of a rebel anyway, in fact, it was a senior school where this really mad, sort of fervent evangelical type was teaching. You could get out of scripture in assembly if you were Jewish or any other religion, but there was really no one of any other religion, because I was one of very few non-Western children. So my best friend was Jewish. So I just kind of pretended I was Jewish for quite a few years, and went to Jewish prayers, and I knew the Jewish prayers better than she did, and I knew the rabbi and everything. And then I can't remember how this worked, but then I realized that wasn't going to work anymore. Then I pretended to be Muslim, and what was happening was that I was sort of going to another classroom with my friend, and of course I had to work and I had to take exams. So the only time I got an A grade at that age, my father sent me 3 questions on Baba. And of course I answered them best. He graded them, my rabbi or mullah as he was then. But the teacher never asked to see, amazingly, the teacher never asked to see the paper. I just went in, sat an exam, wrote my paper about Baba, and then took it home. My father gave me an A. And, but I remember, I don't know how I got away with it, but somehow I managed to make the transition from being Jewish to Muslim without arousing too much suspicion. But then, seriously, but then something must have clicked, because I remember sitting in, there was a beautiful hall where assembly was held, and sitting in there with my friend, and this woman, the teacher came up to me with steam coming out of her ears, really like she was just gone, and she sat down and she shook me and she said, "You're not Muslim, you're not Jewish, you're going to read the Bible." And she said, she was really angry. She said, you're going to sit your exams. And then I went home and spoke to my parents, and we decided that I just would take this exam that she was insisting. I mean, of course, I was sent to the high mistress and everything. So, that I was different in that sense, yes. I'd kind of gone through the religions, but... Oh, the exam was, I don't know, in fact, I made up the questions, and then I had my father write them in his handwriting, and see, they just didn't check. They were very narrow-minded. I mean, they just weren't interested. They just thought, oh, it's different, And it was a kind of school where, I mean, I loved going there because I gained such a lot, but it's a very prestigious school. It's that kind of place, and often if you read the newspaper about someone famous, they'll mention the fact they went to St. Paul's. So it meant a lot to be head girl of the school, and you could only be head girl if you were Christian, and that kind of thing. Not that I would have ever been head girl, but that didn't go down so well. And other than that, with my friends, the thing about England that's so incredible is that people are so conservative and reserved that. Certainly through the years, many, many people asked about Baba, but an awful lot didn't. People who you'd think would, and hardly any of my friends ever did. And I certainly didn't. I have to say, I didn't go out of my way to say, because it was hard for me to know what to say. And, I'm sure it'd be different growing up in California. Well, I think a little bit easier. Depends where you are, I suppose. But this was definitely not the ideal. Everything, the neighbourhood, my school. I mean, it wasn't a circumstance in which to suddenly declare, Baba. So.
Freni, did you have some experience that connects to this at all in terms of raising Shireen, or?
Well, the early part when she was a toddler and all, not much at all, really. But I took her as a 3-month baby to Baba. When Adi sent me off because he thought I needed a rest and he wanted to decorate the house and all that. So I took her as a 3-month baby, and I thought it would be a nice opportunity for Baba to see her. So I went, and the second day when we arrived, Baba called me with Shireen. I went to Mera's house, and I went to Mandali Hall with her, and Mani and Goher were there, and Baba was there, but not Mera. For some reason, Baba didn't have Mera there. And so Baba was sitting in Mandali Hall, and I had this, she 3 months, but she looked at 8-month baby. She was so chubby. And he signaled to me to bring her over to near him. So I went, and he said, give her to me. And I had nothing under her, and I was desperate that something would go wrong. She would wet him or something. But he had her on his lap, and she had, when I brought her home to my family, she saw a couple of men with beards, and she used to cry every time she saw a bearded or a moustached man, So I thought, oh my goodness, she's going to cry seeing Baba too. I didn't think at the time. Anyway, she didn't do anything of the sort. In fact, she was looking into his eyes, and he was looking into hers, and she was gurgling and laughing at him. And I had no camera, and Mani was even signing, no camera, nothing. We couldn't take pictures, It was so lovely to watch these two watching each other, Baba and her, And then I knew that he had given me he'd given me Shireen as a gift, but there was something special about her, which I didn't know, and, till later years. And so that was her first meeting with Baba, and he saw her a couple of times, and before we left when she was 8 months old. And he told me there too, that time too, that I must look after her and take care of her. And so when I went back home to England, England, I used to, he always wanted news about her, how she was growing, and always wanted that, he told Adi and I that she must go to the best school, even the nurseries. And so, of course, we didn't have the means or money to send her to good private schools in those days. But Baba made it possible because somehow a scholarship and Dr. Donkin was a great help. He was her adopted godfather, we don't have godfathers, but he was looking after her education. And so Baba really did so much for her, so I felt that I had no worry in that respect. I had worries when she was growing up, till about 9 she was no bother.
That's pretty late.
But then after we went to Baba for Dara and Amrit's wedding and we came back, then all the problems started. And it's natural, they grow up and she sees her friends doing things. I was more liberal than Adi was. I had to be, otherwise she would have done something more serious, I don't know. But anyway, she was basically a good child, and probably it was, I think, Baba's grace somehow. And the drug scene had come in, in the 60s. And I was worried, I was really worried. Adi wasn't worried so much, but I was. Because we had a young girl staying with us, Pakistani girl, and she was, influenced by a lot of youngsters when she went to school, and she was depressed. She came for plastic surgery on her face, so she was a depressed child, but still, she loved Shireen. She loved Shireen as a sister. And, so I was quite worried that this 16-year-old could do this, so, I was hoping and praying to Baba, and always used to tell Baba, please, see that nothing happens to her while she's schooling and is a teenager. And fortunately, she came through that. And she did well in her graduation, passing through school, which at one time she wanted to drop out. She kept saying, I don't want to study, I don't want at the age of 14.
Next question,
Just to follow up on this, just curiosity, how did you respond to the drug scene at that time, as you saw it around you?
I had friends who were taking, friends in high school who would, I don't know, smoking pot, probably nothing more than that. And I wasn't great friends with them. My best friends all through my life have never, my best and even the kind of the largest circle of good friends have never taken drugs. There was a period when it was hard to sort of root out the friends in school who were and who weren't, because it was this whole group of us together. But it just kind of naturally happened that I didn't spend time with people who were. Then when I went to university, of course, it was much more evident. And again, I had friends who were kind of on the fringe of my circle of really good friends who took drugs. But, I didn't. And it wasn't as if, it really wasn't, it didn't even come up. No one's ever asked me to take drugs, for example. Even though I've gone to parties where there have probably been drugs, and I'm sure that, it's happened. But it never even crossed my mind. It's so 100% black and white, what Baba said. And also just absolutely no interest whatsoever. So that was never a problem for me.
Can you talk a little bit about your family, extended family in England?
Delia.
Yeah.
Who you all know of. And she's really wonderful and has meant a lot to us to my parents ever since they moved there. And, as I described, she and my father had this sort of up and down, relationship. But she's a remarkable woman. I don't know how many of you have actually met her. But, yeah, she's extraordinary and very, very committed to the position that she feels Baba placed her in, which is, and she does complain about her lot now because she's living in a nursing home and she's not very well looked after, and the Baba group doesn't really respond in the way that I would imagine would be the case here or in Myrtle Beach, say. And, she's often compared herself to Kitty and Margaret and Elizabeth and the attention and love and care that they got. And many times people have said, why don't you move to Myrtle Beach? Just as when Elizabeth and Kitty and Margaret were still alive. This was many years ago. And Delia, first of all, I think she couldn't have done simply because of the legalities. But she always felt that Baba stuck her in England, and that's where she had to stay. Go ahead.
Baba actually told her that she was in charge of the London group. Yeah. And she felt, even now, she's always felt greatly devoted to the London group.
Even though people don't show her, there are Baba lovers in the London group who need to be reminded of that fact. Even though people don't treat her in that way necessarily, it's like Margaret, Baba never told her to retire, so from the dancing, and Delia just feels that she just is to stay there. And she used to have these meetings every Tuesday, and sometimes one person will go to her little room on a Tuesday night, and that's her meeting. They say the prayers, or when we couldn't go, she would phone us up and we'd say the prayers with her over the phone. But she's really a very special person in our lives, and my one real big regret about leaving England was leaving in her lifetime, and she misses us terribly. And just to kind of finish it off, but Jay and I lived in Kew for 4 years. And Kew, I mentioned Kew Gardens and where Baba had come and walked through. And in fact, when Baba first came to England, he visited Delia and Delia's mother in her apartment in, was it Richmond? Petersham Hotel. Anyway, he stood in that general area on a balcony overlooking the river Thames. It's a really beautiful scene which Turner, the artist, painted and made really famous. And he looked over this whole expanse, which took in these areas which you won't know, called Richmond and Kew and Twickenham. And that's where many of the prominent members of the London Barber Group came from. Pete Townsend and this whole kind of insurgence of people. So Delia felt that it was as if Baba was just sowing the seeds with his eyes. So Kew's a really special place, not least because the gardens are just absolutely beautiful and wonderful to walk through. And Jay and I had the good fortune to rent an apartment in a building just above Delia's apartment. So for 4 years, she was our neighbour. She lived down below, and we had Mera when we lived there. And we saw her all the time, and she loved having us there. And in fact, when I became pregnant with our daughter, I started helping Delia write her memoirs, which became the book The Ocean of Love, and I wanted to have it with me. I wanted to read the dedication. So for the first 3 months of my pregnancy, I just spent every day with Delia talking about Baba. It was wonderful. It was a real treasure. So.
Speaking of Jay, how did you get into the picture, or do you want to keep that for... I like his view, though, because you're going to say something about his, but he could...
I traveled through... I was on my way to India in 72 to go to Baba's home there and the Samadhi, and on my way I was friends with the Nadels and with Heather and Eric, and Heather in particular at that time strongly recommended that I should stop through and visit with Baba's family in London. I didn't even know that Baba's family was in London, that Baba had family there. So I did so, and I ended up staying for about 4 weeks with them. Like Shireen had said earlier, people would come and they just stay and stay and stay. I was one of those people that just stayed and stayed and stayed. And Shireen's father was very nice, and he took me under his wing. He gave me good advice for when I'm traveling overland and such. and I helped him with his antique work, however, gluing things and sort of a human vice and things like this, and carrying antiques up and down from the attic downstairs and back up again, up and down, and which seemed to be a passion for him. And
Carrying things up and down.
no, having other people carry things up and down. So, Amrit can tell you about it too. And so then I went off to India and came back after about a year or so. Came back and stayed with them again for 6 weeks. So I really stayed for quite a while with the family. But then I was very naughty because I then came back to America and I did not write. And enough time went by without writing that I had this block about writing because I felt so guilty about not having written, and I dreaded the day that I might ever see the family again because I hadn't written. And it really was a tangible kind of guilt. I grew up with a family that sort of puts a lot of stock in guilt, I guess. But anyway, so at any rate, it was something that I really felt strongly, and then the time came I wanted to study, and I was going to apply to a university.
Taking away my thunder from my...
Oh, well, I won't go. Okay, I'll just finish that part. But basically, I went back after many years. I went back in '79 to apply to university in London, and of course, I then wrote a shamefaced letter to Adi, and he wrote a very nice letter back, saying what we've been wondering all these years, what had happened, and yes, of course, come and visit. And then, as it turned out, he took a real interest in my application. But it was the reason I mention this is that with regard to the family, during that time, if I had kept in contact, I had a really great relationship with Shireen when she was 14. I was sufficiently old. I was much older. I mean, at that age level, the difference is greater. So she was like. How
old were you?
I was 19 and she was 14. So she was like a little girl, but she was delightful and lots of fun to be in company with. And so, what I'm saying is that by having not written, basically, I was really very distant from the family. So when I came back again, I got to meet Shireen all afresh. And it's almost like Baba had sort of protected me from maintaining a close relationship by writing with the family, and therefore knowing the family in a way that wouldn't have allowed us to fall in love. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was sort of like that.
Well, after Baba dropped his body, and we had to, like everybody else, Baba's family was hit hard when Baba dropped his body, because they not only lost God, as everybody else lost, but they lost their blood brother, who was their mentor. They used to always approach him for anything they wanted, and he was the advisor. And they loved him, of course. They loved him wholeheartedly, and they loved him as God. And all the family, with the exception of Mani, who's wonderful, who has such control over herself. But I think Adi was hit hard the most because he was away from Baba, that long distance, And so he felt a loss for a long time. And
Jeff was asking about our relationship with Mary and Mani.
oh yeah, but that's how I'm, since that broke off, then of course we approached Mera and Mani for any support we needed. And Mera was, somehow I felt Baba was speaking through her, whenever we talked. I mean, we told our complaints to Mani, and she would, in her way, tell Mera, and Mera would pray for us, any problems we had as a family. Mani would sort of tell Mera, and Mera would give her prayers to Baba, and we would know through Mani how Mera has, been sending messages praying to Baba for us, and she used to send loving messages to us about not to worry, things will go well, if they're difficult. And mainly her schooling, that was my problem. Once Baba dropped his body, 7 months later Dr. Donkin dropped his body. And that was a situation where we were really faced with, it was terrible for Adi and I, because he was the giver of the funds for her education. And Donkin died 7 months later, not changing his will. So anyway, but by Baba's grace things worked out. They were difficult in the beginning, and through Mera's love and her concern for us, she always was very concerned, always asked her Mani how we were doing, and if there were any problems, Mani would always let her know first, when she heard from us. So they gave us a lot of support in view of the fact that since Baba wasn't there, we felt, my impression was that, and now I feel the same with Mani. And we always approach Mani now, now Mera's gone. And so that's how we carried on. I mean, despite the fact we lost but we lost Baba, Mera, and now we have to hold on to Mani. And may she live for a very, very long time. That's all I can say, Baba, please. And
can you say something about that? Yeah.
Well, really, what Mum has said is so true. I mean, they're absolutely central in our lives, and the love we have and respect that we have for Mera and Mani is, it's impossible to describe. And now when Jay and I got married, as an example, I don't want to say too much because I won't have anything to say on Sunday, but it was very important that our marriage be handled correctly, so that Mera should be happy, and but basically Jay and I had to we had to be extremely discreet, shall we say, until it was official, and then Mera was told officially, yes?
No, I had to write to Mera to say that you were planning to get engaged.
Yes, but it had to be done in that way. It couldn't just be, oh, by the way. And Mera and Mani arranged our wedding, and we're so incredibly fortunate. But, I wrote to Mera, and of course, and told her about Jay and as much as I could. And then I just requested that we could be married in India, which she said we could, and asked that she and Mani would do everything. And they did, to the absolute last detail, which again I won't say now because I want to save it for Sunday, but it was really incredible. And so on and so forth. Really there hasn't, I wouldn't dream of making a major step in my life without informing Mani first, and informing her in such a way that, more as a matter of respect, but also because of genuinely wanting her advice. I would ask her advice and such. She's absolutely central to all of us, but I'm extremely close to her, and I just can't say enough how important she is.
One thing though, like the story earlier you were saying about when you were wanting to study psychology and ended up studying Italian, and Mani then wrote and said how glad she was that you had made that decision, and you were keeping them informed of your thoughts. I thought I'd add that always turning to Mani with our plans and the way things are shaping up and such like. She always gives us advice, but it's not. She doesn't give us. She doesn't tell us what to do. It's always a question of just informing her and letting her know what's happening, and then getting her wisdom, because she's such a wise woman, to confirm that we're doing the right thing.
Yes. And there's never been anything remotely... once I was talking to a good friend of mine about my relationship with money, and she was listening she was very interested and sympathetic, and she said, well, don't you kind of feel a little bit like you're an adult, and do you really have to... I mean, she put it in a nice way. It was more curiosity. She wasn't trying to be offensive or anything. But she was sort of suggesting, don't you feel that it's a little oppressive, to have to be accountable to so many people, not just your husband, but, your aunt in India. And it's really never been like that, ever. I mean, it's just been a great honour and really, and privilege to have her to ask these questions of, or to write to her and tell her what we're planning to do regarding our move to America. I mean, the fact that she's interested, I mean, we really feel very fortunate. And I think that's echoed with all of my generation and Baba's family, the twins and Dara and Amrit. I mean, that you'd have to be crazy not to do that. We're very, very lucky. But she's absolutely right there with Jay and Mera and Freni. I mean, she's, for me, she's that important, and I just hope she lives to be 100 or 105.
I think the time button has been hit, or has it? Yes, you see. So thank you. Well, is there time for questions? Can she read a dedication?
Yeah, a quick dedication.
Take 2 seconds. But I just wanted to also mention, talking about England, that England's a strange place, but it's no coincidence that Baba stopped there first on his way to America. I mean, England was the first place in the West that Baba came to. And this is the dedication. Delia has called her book The Ocean of Love, and I really recommend that you read it. It's just wonderful. But the dedication which Delia gives, she explains, these words, given by Meher Baba on the seashore at Combe Martin, Devon, on April 22nd, 1932, have inspired me to call my little tribute The Ocean of Love, dedicated to beloved Meher Baba. And this is what Baba actually said on at the seaside. Baba is like the sun. Anyone whose heart is pure can receive the rays. Make the heart pure by thinking of the Master and then loving him. Baba is like the sea, which receives weak or strong, diseased or healthy, dotard, sinner or saint. Baba is like an infinite ocean, and in order to realize him, the ego must be annihilated altogether. Jai Baba.